We're recording. This is the Kubernetes SIG Network meeting from April 15th, 2021. I didn't ask in advance, but Tim or Bridget, do you have triage ready to go?
I do.
Excellent, because I do not.
I didn't get all the way through it before the meeting today, though, which there's a bunch to talk about.
Cool. Let's
All right.
get to it then.
Window. You guys got it?
Looks good.
We do.
All right. All right. So in reverse chronological order, I did filter out a few before. So if anybody looked more than an hour ago, you probably will miss some. Here's a user who's reporting a problem with graceful termination, but it wasn't exactly clear what the issue was. So I followed up asking for a bit more explanation, but I could use a volunteer to follow up when this person responds to figure out if this is actually a bug or just a misunderstanding of what happens.
Send this one my way.
You got it. All right. HTTP lifecycle hook tests flake on multi-node clusters. The interesting part here is this one, SIG Windows. So it sounds like there's some assumption, there's some comments on here from Antonio and discussion about the networking model, which does not require that host network be able to reach other pods unless the platform supports host networking mode, which Windows does not. So there's already been a response. So what is the right answer here? So it sounds like there's something baked into the test somewhere that is assuming that this can happen.
Those particular tests are, so Kubernetes itself is dialing in the HTTP request whenever that pre-stop or post-start lifecycle event happens. So basically, Kubernetes has to be able to connect to different pods on different nodes in this scenario. So
given the way the test is written.
Yes, exactly. I have sent a pull request which forces both pods to be on the same node, which conforms to the networking model that is already public and documented. But it's still interesting that in some scenarios it still works, even though maybe it shouldn't, since there's no pod with host network enabled. And apparently that also happens on Linux with Flannel overlay, from what someone told me that they've tested in particular.
Well, Claudio, check the comment from Tim. Is the kubelet in Linux should be able to reach the pods? I mean,
yeah, that says with host network enabled, right?
yeah, but I mean, host network enabled means that is the kubelet process. I mean, doesn't have to be a pod. It has to be something running in the root namespace, no? And kubelet is running in the root namespace. So let me verify with the people here. So the kubelet process is going to have the same network than a pod with host network true.
Yeah. That is the way almost everybody implements it, although I don't know that that's a requirement.
I thought it was a check, right? Don't we like check in the kubelet that it's, or maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, for a while there were people running kubelet as a container on the machine. So at least in the past it has worked. It wasn't clear to me if that was running in host network or not. My memories are a little fuzzy there. Anyway, I don't think there's anything specifically that says kubelet has to be able, or has to run in the root namespace, just that it has to be able to reach the pods.
what I'm trying to do is if we can do this correlation, is if host network should reach other pods, the kubelet should or must reach the other pods in other nodes too, or not. That is the answer that we need to give to Claudia.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, say that one more time, Antonio.
What we need to answer is if kubelet must reach other pods in other nodes.
It is not a requirement that it must be able to, only if the platform supports host network.
So in Linux, it must.
I guess that is the definition of a platform, yeah? No?
No, not even on Linux, no. You don't need kubelet to reach other pods.
But that's the other thing is a pod with host network is the same that a process in the host.
Yeah.
So then if the conclusion is that kubelet in Linux must reach other pods in other nodes.
I want to be very specific because people might have pseudo multi-tenancy around nodes and where nodes cannot like access each other's and so on. Pods needs to access each other's where allowed. Node must be able to route services, traffic, but there is nothing that says every kubelet must be able to access every pod on the cluster.
But then it's impossible that a pod with host network is able to reach all the pods. You know, I mean,
two pods.
To give an answer.
What I'm trying to say is that two processes can be running on root namespaces. One of them is able to access other pods, and one of them can't. All right, that's fine. Okay. Right?
There could be firewalls there, or there could be other routing issues there. The requirement is pods in host namespace must be able to reach other pods, not kubelet, even if most of the time that is true both ways.
Okay, so I was okay. Then I got what I mean.
I'm not sure that was the intent of the way it was written, but that is the fallout of the way it is written. Okay, so let's take this one. Who's assigned to this? Antonio, are you assigned? No, I'm assigned. Okay, I'll look at it later and see if there's more to respond. Kubecode will describe endpoint slice panics. This one's a fun one. I just kept it here so I could stick Rob's in.
There's already a bug fix. Assign it to me, but there's already a PR that should fix this.
Excellent.
Seems like we should triage accept it too, right?
Yes. Oh, I should just have a shortcut. Okay. Q Proxy not creating HNS endpoints. I don't even know what HNS is.
It's the
it's a Windows thing.
Connector.
It's the Windows host networking service.
I see.
So this is a Q Proxy bug somewhere where for some reason it doesn't actually create those endpoints on a certain version of Windows. I suspect it's probably related to like a Windows patch version or something, but I'm not sure. But I think it's assigned to me, and I'll go with James. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. IPVS error log occupation with external traffic policy local. So there was some good triage on this one already. It sounds like if there are no endpoints for an IPVS service, the kernel prints out a helpful error message. Of course, if it prints it out over and over again, it's not so helpful. Lars was thinking up, and Ricardo thinking up ways we could get around this. Who is it assigned to? It's assigned to nobody. Can I assign it to one of either Lars or Ricardo? Or somebody else if they want to take it?
Yeah, I can take it.
Thank you. Flaky
Is
test.
It worth the effort? Is it worth the effort to? Is it worth the effort to add and remove IP tables rules for when it's empty? We add a rule, and when it gets an endpoint locally, we remove.
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
It.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know what else. There are other IP tables rules being written in there. So if it's easy, then yes, it's worth it. If it's really, really hard, then no, it's not. And the truth is, it's probably somewhere in between.
Yep, I checked.
Okay. Flaky test services should function for service endpoints using host network.
It's assigned to me, but
Just
do your magic of triage.
Accepted.
Yeah.
Do I have? Yes, there we go. Another flaky test. Services should function for pod to service with host network UDP.
Wait, is that one of the ones where depending on where the pod lands, it works? So it's like if it's on the node, I feel like.
Yeah, this is this one assigned to me. I think that there are 2 or 3 of them.
Awesome.
It's like a whole class of tests that are poorly defined that we just call flakes.
Dual stack tests on Windows.
Is this recently due to that fallout from the dual stack issue?
No,
I know
I think
Anish
this is
was
Anish.
working on this. Yeah.
Anish is just adding tests.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's assigned already. We triage
I
it.
think it's assigned to Anish. You could just drop the triage. Anish is working on this.
He's well aware of it. We have a bunch of those tests that are currently listed as Linux only, and it would just be nice if they were more.
Sure. Okay. Cloud provider service controller race with node sync and service updates. This is a particularly fun one because I don't think it's actually specific to this case. But the example I thought was interesting to read. It's possible that in the process of deleting a load balancer, we also end up recreating the load balancer and then leaking it because the delete was already observed. And I'm not sure off the top of my head what the right fix here is. Some sort of interlock between controllers.
My memory is fuzzy, but I do believe it was fixed but by finalizers. Like service load balancers are only deleted after service finalizers are called. That was at least 2 years back, so I'm fuzzy.
Do you want to dig into it?
Sure.
Kubernetes bypasses external firewall ports. This was a really fun one to read. Apparently we're magical and we can bypass firewalls. There's information missing, so I've already asked for more help there. Jay also commented a little bit. So unless somebody really wants this one, I'll just assign myself.
I mean, I think that one's probably just going to wind up getting closed, right? Because it can't possibly be a bug on our end, right?
My suspicion is, the firewall rule is insufficiently precise or something.
Either that or Kubernetes really is magic. That would be worth a blog post.
Our packets are so strong, they bypass firewalls.
This is probably the
Docker
last one,
shim.
Tim.
Okay, last one then. Docker shim deprecation. I think this is mostly about documentation by the time we get to the end. Yes, we need to write up somewhere how an end user who was using Docker shim or using KubeNet before can recreate that behavior with bog standard CNI. Does anybody know, does such a doc exist, Dan?
I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But you can assign that one to either me or Casey Calandrello, Squeed, or just assign both of us. Why not?
You got it. All right. I turn over the reins.
Thank you, Tim.
Can we do one more? There is a probe failure, like you have it open as a tab, and I'm just waiting for some feedback, and either you look at it and we provide feedback later, or we do it now. But
I'll look at it.
Yeah, thank you.
So I was next. I wanted to share. I sent an email on the mailing list. That's what it's called. About this SIG Network 2021 annual report that we need to fill out. I have put up a draft of this with all of the questions and started putting some comments on it myself. But I think the intention here is for everybody to contribute to this conversation a little bit, and then we can agree as a SIG on what we want to put in stone for our annual report.
I have a question about this. I see that we're concerned possibly about not having done a community-wide update, and I didn't dig in far enough to find out what that actually is, but is it just like some members of this group report somewhere else in some form?
Yes.
And if that's the case, could we get around that by saying, well, we haven't done one in a while, but we've scheduled it. And I volunteer to help with making it scheduled and happen if we wanted to make a forward-looking statement there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we should definitely schedule one. It's been a long time since at least the last one I was aware of. I think this document is more just about making us think about those sort of things. Clearly,
I think that's our only way. That's our only way out of the obligations that we hold.
Is performing them.
Yeah. Yes. Or at least committing to do so imminently.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we have quite a bit to talk about in this update.
Yeah, we've had a busy year.
Yeah, for sure. There were times when we didn't, and so it's kind of like, well, we could, not really say anything. We can say we're here, but
since this was, by the way, I understand that this was due April 1st and we are late. Do we have a specific date that you're going to ask everyone to please put comments in, et cetera, by, so that you can submit it by a predetermined date? Soon or sometime are both valuable, but like, when are you actually planning on pulling the trigger?
Can we say we should have this turned in by this time 2 weeks, by this next meeting? Is that fair? Is that too long?
I mean, I think at this point we are overdue. Like the date to have this done was last week.
Yeah.
So the sooner the better, but we should make sure we're getting it right. So if we think it takes 2 weeks to gather up that information and good on our obligations.
The truth is that a lot of stuff doesn't get done until right before it's due. So if we put it for 2 weeks out, a lot of people are going to do it Thursday morning. So if we put it 1 week out, maybe they'll do it a week instead of 2 weeks. I was out the first half of this week. This is my own excuse, but it's in my box to do. Should we set like a week from today?
Yeah, I think let's do that. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with your waiting until the last minute assessment. That is what I did here. So,
okay.
What if we just like copied this into a Google Doc and stayed 10 minutes after this meeting and just sat a few of us and just did it right now? So, and then Casey, you could finish polishing it the evening, or any of us can. That might be the most efficient thing rather than waiting another week.
I don't object to that, except that I don't have the 10 minutes after this meeting. So
yeah, I'll have to catch up. I have hard stop. So
how about the 10 last minutes of this meeting? Because that's what we did for SIG Windows. We just did it. We just cut it over.
I'm told we have a very full agenda today, so there may not be a good last 10 minutes.
Also, a track record of comments is probably something you want to show and something like that.
Yeah, I think GitHub should be a fine enough format for having this conversation. We can, I'm happy to set up another half hour, 15 minutes sometime for people who are interested to chat it out live as well.
If it's helpful to you, I'm happy to do that. If you spend like 2 days randomly asynchronously messaging people trying to get information and it's more efficient, I'm happy to come at least on some of the stuff I know about.
Maybe we can, I don't know, how does tomorrow look for people? Regroup in the, we have your usual thing, the Q Proxy.
You can just double dip. We can just do it as part of that. Well, y'all want to just come and just do that, like as part of that thing, or do this report?
I can show up for the first part.
Okay.
Tomorrow 8:30.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do
yeah.
Let's do this. There's the open PR now. Anybody who wants to take a look asynchronously. Tomorrow, there's the Q Proxy meeting at 8:30 Pacific. We can talk about it more there, and goal being this time next week, we're done. Okay.
That's very good to me.
See you tomorrow.
Next.
Oops, that's the wrong tab. Yeah, next we had Jay, Ricardo, Doug to talk about Q Proxy.
Go ahead, Jay. You put our name on that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. What? Yeah. Can we? Oh yeah, the flag deprecation thing. So we were talking about this Friday. Is it okay for us to finally start deprecating those flags? Does anybody? We'll do all the details of it, but is it in general, are people okay with that? And if so, can we take some? Is there anything? Can we just do it?
Sorry, which flags? I don't know the agenda.
You know all those flags in Q Proxy that don't work, which is most of them. They're like no ops.
Yeah, the no ops seem fair. Like they should be aged out by now, right?
Yeah, well, you can use them to generate a Q Proxy config, which is, I guess, the thing that they, I think, or something. But other than that, yeah.
I'm in favor of getting rid of them if they're not working right.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So we'll just move forward with that on this KEP, and the other part with the KEP is making sort of some strict like failure scenarios, I guess, where somebody puts the flag in, the flag doesn't do anything, it's gonna break, right?
Right.
So as long as people are just aware of that. So it might break people with Ansible scripts that have, you know what I mean, like, or whatever,
But all of these flags were already marked as deprecated, right? Yes, they should have been.
Were they? I don't even. Is that what the answer hinges on, whether they were marked as deprecated? I think they were, but I don't know.
Yeah, the deprecation policy has a rule for deprecating flags to admin-facing tools. And I think it's one release that you have to have a deprecation warning.
All right. Cool. So that's good enough, I think. I think that's enough for us to move forward with.
Okay.
We'll just mark them. Cool. I don't think, yeah, that's it. That's the only question.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Ricardo, you're next.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really fast. First of all, sorry about leaving my mic open. I click on mute, but it keeps on muting. Sorry then. So it's I have started some effort about moving Q Proxy outside repo. I was chatting a little bit with Antonio and also with our group in Q Proxy, and I have opened so far 4 PRs. Me and Casey, we struggled last week with some as well, trying to do that Q Proxy vendoring. So yeah, even if we are doing some capping thing, I think it's worth to move that outside of the repo, right? So I've opened 4 PRs. I mostly doing some small movements here, but one that's pretty big. And I would like to ask you folks to take a look into that, review the big one. It's probably just you can approve, team, because it's it messes with API and other things, mostly moving constants outside the API machinery theme. But yeah, I guess it is. I've sent also an email. I'm gonna probably keep updating you about that. And the last thing is, if you people think that we should open a cap for the last part, which is moving package/proxy to outside of the repo or not. I have an opinion that probably we shouldn't, because I always listen that if you are vendoring Kubernetes, you are going to suffer and have some pain, and we are not responsible for that. But on the other hand, it's probably going to break some CNIs vendoring Kubernetes/Kubernetes. So,
and caps are how we communicate even within the broader Kubernetes world, right? There are other folks who might have feelings about this, who aren't here, who don't come to our regular meetings, but would see a cap. So I would say yes. And specifically to discuss the point about whether it should go live under staging or whether it should actually really move out.
Okay, roger that. About the helper functions, I don't know if it's worth to write a cap for them as well, because most of them are like package IPVS, package IP tables, package CCTL. So it's all up to you, but the PRs, they are already open there. If someone wanna take a look into that, I am trying mostly to make like small movements with them. That's it, Casey.
So are folks okay with this here, and it's just a matter of doing the cap, or is there anyone who's like, oh, this is a bad idea? Because we're like, could do it, you know what I mean? But it's not really much point doing it if people don't want us to do it. But is everybody else okay with it? It's here, or at least sort of in principle, okay.
I'm happy with it in principle. I think it's a great idea in principle. Even if we only get to the very last step and then don't actually move it, we'll have broken all those dependencies and fixed the organization of it. But I do think it's probably worthwhile. I'm just going to have to go look at the individual PRs and make sure that there's nothing that stands out to me as like, oh God, I missed that before. But I don't think of anything.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
There are some other things that are harder to take a look, like the async package that is used by kubelet, Q Proxy, and I don't know where to put that, but that will be probably pinging with the exceptions.
Yeah, we have, there was at some point a request to move some of those more complicated packages off to Kubernetes utils. I remember reading a pull request for, I don't think it was async, but it was something similar to that in scope. And we found some issues that were like actual real bugs with making it a standalone API. And it turned out it was just the person who was proposing it didn't have that much energy and walked away from it. And there's still bugs, those bugs still exist. But since they're entirely internal, they're less of a huge deal.
Yeah, the async one cannot be moved to utils because it vendors another Kubernetes repo.
Okay.
That's client Go. But I am moving one that's called Slice, and I am like fighting with the old history because it's a pre-client, pre-license agreement and merge message. So when I've moved it with all of the history, I've got like a lot of punches from pro, like you cannot commit, you cannot do that. So my question about that one specifically, that's on the meeting notes, but if we should keep the history about that package, or if we should just move, because there are things from 2015 that all those rules weren't applied yet.
Yeah. I think we should keep the history, even if we end up adding one commit that says remove all of the files that we don't need to move this between repos. And then we have just a bunch of, not so useful.
Is that the bots won't let the PR merge because the old commits are not up to snuff. I had done a PR to move bounded frequency runner, which is probably one of the things that you were looking at in async, Ricardo, to utils, and you had approved it, but it couldn't merge. And then we were like, oh, we'll deal with this after freeze. And then I keep forgetting, and Vegetabot actually just closed it this morning.
Well, there are still a small number of people who can manually approve merges. So if we have to do that, we can.
Okay.
I have an opinion around util. Util is a very dangerous place to have anything, right?
It's one thing to be it was supposed to be a collection of really trivial stuff,
yeah,
and it's becoming increasingly less trivial.
The problem with util is you're telling people you can vendor that, which means you're creating a contract around that API. And I'm not talking about API, REST API, I'm talking about Golang API.
Yep.
And let's just say around at least the APIs I've looked at is not exactly the cleanest, right? And it has things like, So with these things we can always absorb in the way we use them. But if we tell the world that you can use these things, it becomes a whole different game. And I'm not sure if the entire project is meant to serve people by providing packages they can use other than Clango.
Well, there has to be some like bright line for these kind of things like component utils and stuff like that like we don't intend for other projects to import them.
So the line, I mean, unfortunately, the way the Go ecosystem works is if you can see it and it's not in an internal directory, it's fair game, which we've at least written in various places, like don't vendor Kubernetes because we won't support you, right? All of the other repos, though, are less well-defined, less bright-liney. Util was explicitly done so that people could take useful stuff out of the Kubernetes ecosystem and use it. And like part of the meaning there was, we will support this. Whenever we bring something into utils, we hold it to a generally higher bar. None of it is perfect. There's some things in there that I look at too, and I go, I wish we hadn't done that. But we do hold it to a higher bar for testing and for documentation and for API cleanliness than we do for internal stuff. Something like async is big enough that it might just warrant its own repo.
My problem with offering these things for people is you have no control on what these things can vendor in. So let's say we are in a situation where we can use these things in Kubernetes, but they vendor some weird thing and we're okay with that and we understand it. Now, if we offer it to external people, then it becomes a shared, like even the stuff that you vendor into the stuff that you build into utils becomes something we need to worry about. I'm just not sure that it provides. Yeah, copy the code, man. If you need the code, copy it, right? If you want something that does,
utils is supposed to be like almost import free. There's supposed to be very few imports there, and so and there's a rule that it can't import other Kubernetes repos. So like if we're really vendoring client Go, which boggles my mind, I'd have to go figure out what the heck we're doing there. Then that it's not a candidate, right? This is part of like the logging stuff that I've been doing in my free time, is to get rid of logging dependencies out of places like util, because unfortunately Kubernetes has caused glog and klog to proliferate across the Go ecosystem. I agree with you. I'm agreeing something like async is big enough and subtle enough that we don't want to copy it internally. We want to find a place where we can share it amongst each other, and vendoring Kubernetes is not a starter. So we have to find a place for it. Even if we put a big thing in the README that says, this is really project internal, please don't mess with it. Go doesn't have a way to represent that.
It's also very important that if you don't say it clearly, people will consider it fair game.
Yes. Well, we also we don't version tag these repos in any way, so that people who are vendoring them are never going to get a 1.0.0 version. They're always just going to get point something 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 plus git. All right. Anyway, Ricardo, thank you for and Jay, thank you for taking on the hard work of starting that. I'll go. Those PRs are in my queue. I will definitely look at them and have a hard think about how to break those dependencies.
Right. Thanks.
That's all, Ricardo. I'm not just lawyer.
Thanks, Ricardo. Dan Winship, I think you're next on dual stack.
Yeah, it was just a quick thing. So we had talked a while back about doing a KEP for making the API server dual stack, and then I didn't get around to filing it, and that is now filed. Still figuring some bits of it out, but it could, people can start commenting. I realize that since it's going to be behind a feature gate, that means that it talks about some pain and flapping connect or services and stuff like that, but that's mostly only going to be for the early adopters. Once the feature goes GA, it should all work pretty smoothly. So anyway, that's it.
Cool.
I like the bug you filed, by the way, on the endpoints ownership. That was a good one.
Rob, you're up next.
Okay, yeah, mine is really simple. It's just we have a fair amount of people for Gateway API in lots of different time zones. And so we're trying to find times that work for as many people as possible. So if you're interested in attending those meetings, being part of the working group, just fill out that straw poll with when you're available, and we'll try and find times that work. That's all we've got.
Thank you, Rob. We've got Abhishek, Ding Yang.
Yeah,
You
I'm here.
guys on? Oh, cool.
Yeah, so this is a quick question for the team. This is something that came up on the cluster network policy KEP, and we discussed this in this week's network policy API subgroup meeting as to where to host the CRDs or the resources. And there were two options. One is, it is part of the networking API group, or we host them into a Kubernetes SIG repo specific for cluster network policy. So I think the general feeling is that we will host it in a separate repo under Kubernetes SIGs. The question is that should it be specific to cluster network policy resources, or should it be a more generic network policy repo? Because there are discussions around V2 network policy, which might have their own CRDs. So should they all live together, or should it be specific? Any thoughts?
Did I vaguely remember discussing this? What did we decide that it was better to stick it in CRDs than to put it in the networking group alongside the existing network policy?
I think the problem was that if we want to do it as a V1 Alpha 1 API, there would be some issues because we already deprecated and removed the V1 Alpha 1 for network policy or the networking group. So yeah. I think Antonio had some comments around that. So maybe it sounds like it is a good idea to have it as a separate repo. Maybe also just follow what Gateway API folks have done, and maybe we'll evolve quickly. But then the question is, should it be specific, or rather, how specific that repo should be? Because although those different resources are related, but they are not related.
Yeah, it's useful. The goal of API groups was to associate things that are related and that would be used by the same sets of users, and not necessarily to be just grouped by SIG, although ultimately that's kind of what happened, right? We end up with networking and storage and other groups. Do we have any belief or understanding of what the other things would be?
So one example that comes to my mind, I think Gobind is working on something like a DNS policy resource. I know Jay, Ricardo, we are all talking about a V2 for network policy, which may be a different resource by itself, kind of an evolution for the network policy V1.
Okay.
Now, they are all not necessarily related to each other. Rather, I mean, it's not something that will, graduate together. But again, they fall under the umbrella of network policy.
Yeah, I think those are related enough to be in one group.
Okay. So maybe we'll start the work on getting a repo for us under Kubernetes 6.
Okay, we'll just need to.
A small follow-up question here. Would it be in the same networking.x.k8s.io that Gateway API is using? And is there any kind of, we have previously deprecated versions of API groups for core types. I don't know if we have any concept of that for official CRDs like this, but having the same group span across repos like this could be interesting.
But I think that the summary is the last meeting we say if we need to implement something new, most probably it has to be a V2 in network policy. And I think that the request is to do the same that you are doing with the Gateway API, create a new CRD with a new group, no?
Right. So for Gateway, we have a generic API group that's that could be used for any networking resource. It's just networking.x-k8s.io that we're using, which theoretically you could use too. I'm just not sure if that's what we want or not.
So I think there's two issues. One, should we try to coordinate one group across multiple efforts and repos? And two, should it still be using X-K8s? Like I believe at some point in Gateway, we said we need to decide at some point in the future whether it's going to stay as X-K8s or K8s, right?
Yeah.
So, the distinction between X-K8s and K8s being things under X-K8s are not subject to the Kubernetes API review process, and things under K8s.io are. My feeling would be that we should probably move it under K8s.io for a gateway. I don't know how coordinating across different repos would work. We need to have some coordination scheme, but it could work. Don't you think?
How would API review work? I guess, for CRDs, we have a pretty standard process within Kubernetes release cycle, but CRDs kind of live with their own release cycle, their own everything, and not the same kind of formal processes for review.
Yeah, you'd have to file a bug with API reviewers and get somebody like myself or Jordan or David or Daniel to take a look at it and say that they're happy with it.
But that's for if you have it in tree. If you have out of tree, you don't.
No, you can have it out of tree also.
But that's not mandatory.
If you want to use a something.k8s.io suffix,
okay.
It is.
Okay.
Right. That's why we created x-k8s.io so that people could be a SIG owned API without being an official API. So getting the extra level of review just gives it a little bit more gravity, I guess. So then the question is, could we coordinate one namespace like that across multiple projects? We need something somewhere to say, hey, I'm using the foobar name, nobody else can use it, right? Some I don't want to say a spreadsheet, but like a Git repo somewhere that lays claim to names within that namespace.
Do you know if there are there other groups doing that? I mean, storage, they used to have a lot of projects outside.
I don't know if there are other groups doing it. It's a good question.
I will ask. I will try to ask.
Storage would be the likely, if anybody's doing it, it's probably storage. So maybe we should ask them what they've done with this and just follow the pattern. If they created multiple namespaces, then maybe we should just do that. I think we can, there's no limit on the prefix too, right? So we can say policy.networking.kates.io and something else.networking.kates.io. But given these projects are all network policy focused, like they really do feel like the same group.
So what you're saying is policy would be one group and gateway would be a separate group.
Yes. I mean, that's one way to do it, right? It could be gateway.networking.kates.io and policy.networking.kates.io.
Yeah.
But within policy, there would be 3 separate projects creating different CRDs.
Yeah.
Now, there's a new issue that just popped into my head there. Like, I know you're not allowed to share an API group between CRDs and built-ins, but I don't know if that applies to suffix sharing. I'm presuming it doesn't, but I have never tried. So we should try a few things and then talk to storage. So who's taking the action there? Do you want to reach out to storage folks? Who opened this topic? I forget.
That was me, Abhishek.
Abhishek, do you know any of the storage people? Do you want me to, I can do it. Let me take it.
If you can point me to someone, I'll take up the action.
Yeah,
All right.
Abhishek, if you need help with that too, Tim, feel free to CC on me on that stuff. It's Andrew Stoikis.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be part of that and/or start that discussion.
Okay.
It could affect Gateway as well.
Yes. All right. I'll send an email or something, or I'll start a Slack, even better.
I guess, Andrew, maybe just can you add a note to our policy agenda for Monday to just check up on that?
Yeah, no, for sure. We were going to do it this week in Slack anyway, so this is better. Thanks for bringing it up, Abhishek.
Maybe we'll follow up on it, Abhishek, since you're out, and maybe the netball group can figure out who does it Monday if you want.
Yeah, feel free to drag me in, but thanks for helping out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. I think, let's see, Ramesh J.
Yes, I'm here. A quick note about the CAP for all ports services support. This is a work in progress. I've dropped the link in the agenda, but thanks to everyone that already reviewed it and offered alternative approaches as well. It'll be great to get some more comments on it, mostly about the use cases for all port services around, do we need it for cluster IP services? Is it just, is load balancer support sufficient? And also about the approaches, if any of them could break any use cases for it. So yeah, it's still very much in progress, but it'll be great to get more discussion on it. Yeah, just wanted to say that, that's all.
And then just in time, we're at the last topic from Claude.
Yeah, we've actually discussed about this in the triage at the beginning.
Okay.
I have a quick question before we drop. Does anybody know or care about this whole client go multiple endpoints thing of it being able to support multiple endpoints for API servers? Like, does anybody know who would work on that, or if people care about doing that? It would allow, Q Proxy and Kubelet and everything else to not have to go through load balancers. And it's an issue that we were triaging in the NetPol subproject or in the Q Proxy subproject. And I was like, I asked if we could close it, and then somebody yelled at me. So I figure maybe they want us to hunt down the solution, but I don't know whether, do you have to file KEPs for client Go? Like, I don't even know how it works. I assume it would be pretty easy. You just put a damn array and a round robin in the thing if you wanted to do it, right?
I mean, I don't know exactly what the implications are, but the environment variables that we've always used are singular. And so anybody who's parsing those environment variables today would break if we changed the format of it. We didn't define it as an array. So we'd have to, like, there's multiple levels of discovery that happen there for the endpoint IPs, right? Like if we're talking about the IPs that come out of a kube config versus the IPs that you find in the what's it called? In where?
Environment. In pod.
Yeah, in the environment variables. Thank you.
And in my assumption is the client Go in pod uses the service IP, so it's load balanced. Because the service, the Kubernetes default service, will have all the endpoints of the API server.
Yeah, they want this because they want the use cases. I want to use this for Q Proxy, for example, because you cannot have a service until you have Q Proxy.
Oh.
And I don't want to put a load balancer in the control plane. You know, that's the use case. So I just tell the client Go in Q Proxy to go to these 3 API servers.
Yeah, it's a chicken or the egg thing for the Q Proxy specific part of it.
It's not a general use case, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable corner case to handle multiple for that, but I don't know the client Go stuff well enough to know how hard it would be.
I talked with this internally with some people from API machinery, and they were thinking in something about that. And there is a PR that got stuck with an implementation, but I don't know. It's client Go. I don't think that until you have everything sorted out and that's super strict. I don't think that.
What should we do as we're going through issues like with stuff like this that's just not going to be solved, but it's not an invalid request? Like, is there a label for like a bike shed label or something, like where you could say like, okay, well, let's just keep talking about this forever.
Let's close it or something like that.
Well, no, because we don't. I mean, I think there's 2 categories there. There's the ones that we don't know quite what to do yet. We think they're valid. Let's leave them open and see if we can discuss them later. And there's the ones where we agree are valid, but we're never going to do it. So let's just close it, because why have 6,000 open bugs?
How do we prove to someone that we're never going to do it? Like, what's the bar there? Like, I'm happy to just bring them up here every once in a while and just be like, so for this one specifically, should I just say that? Because I feel the same way, like Antonio mentioned, like, I don't feel like it's ever going to happen, but.
I mean, if you really think it's never going to happen and the folks on API machinery agree, like, we should just close it.
All right, I'll just ask
exactly.
them.
I like Bridget's language that she just posted in the chat, right? Like, this issue is a real issue and we understand it, but we're probably not going to fix it because the implications of fixing it are just too big.
Yeah. Okay.
You might want
to. Yeah, go ahead. Bridget.
Oh, I was just saying you might want to put some language in there about blast radius and surface area. Like, fixing it for you sounds great, but there are going to be knock-on effects that we don't want to occur.
It's not even a fix, it's a feature request, right? Yeah. Another thing I need you to, I need us grounded a bit. We have the luxury of clouds, so load balancers are there.
Yeah.
Bare metal, it's harder. And I'm guessing whoever pushing for this, it's a bare metal deployments, because that's where you suffer the most.
Yeah. And to be clear, in this case, I don't object to leaving it open. If we think that, given somebody with sufficient incentive that they would actually implement it in a way that we could convince David Eads to accept, then I'm cool with that.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should say we're not gonna fix. I'm just saying let's keep it. Let's think about it. All right. If it's one of those things that will require a large surface area, then we need to schedule it in a way, and people understand that. Yeah, it's a corner case, and we would like to add it, but it will take time. All I'm saying.
Unfortunately, these are the sorts of issues where we ask people to file a CAP, and then we spend 3 months pounding on the CAP, and then they get frustrated and walk away from very often. And it's not that we should change the process. It's just, this is what happens sometimes.
I mean, if you can take the bounding, right?
Like you would know.
All I'm saying is that some feature from the vantage point of a person like me who works mostly in cloud environment, something like that is like, no, all right. A vantage point of somebody who's using this on edge or bare metal might be fundamentally different, right? So I don't want to step on people's foot because,
That's why I want a label for these things, so we can at least just not have them as part of our triage. Like, okay, this is a thing, over 90 comments. It's a separate, we should have a word for this and a label for it. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
This could be also some. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say there's priority backlog, which is maybe as close as we've got to this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that probably this could be something, as like I am an on-premises bare metal user, and this could probably be like best practices for on-premises, like you can run an HA proxy and keep alive it, and this is the way that we suggest you doing this. It's not like the end of the world. I know that there is a case of the edge computing thing, but for mostly the bare metal one, probably we should say, hey, we can do better, like writing how we think it's the best architecture for this case. I can at least like try to make some documentation about that and see and ask, hey, does this solve this to you, instead of like doing.
I mean, that's great. I think it doesn't address the larger question of, there's always going to be a stream of these. Yeah, we agree with it, but it's just too complicated to tackle right now. Or we welcome anybody to do this, but understand that it's going to be, like slaying a dragon. Do we close the issue and pretend it never existed, or do we leave it open and let the number of open issues just continue to grow over time, right? We're at 2,000 open issues right now.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
right.
In this case, maybe they won't fix is.
Right. Or maybe we need a different way of denoting like ideas that we would love to do, but we used to have a version 2 accumulator bug where every time somebody came up with one of these, like, this would be awesome, but it's so challenging, it requires a V2, and just go add your ideas to that. And then it just became like it's like screaming into the wind, right? It's like a venting place.
Okay.
Where did that go? It's gone?
I think the issue itself might still be around, but like nobody takes it seriously. It's not like there's no plans to make a V2 that breaks things in any fundamental way. So a lot of those ideas are just non-starter ideas. They're just too big to be worthwhile.
Reach out to DIMS. DIMS were tracking and we're working on that thing.
I occasionally go back and I read through that issue and I live in my little dream world of how nice it would be if we did all the things in this bug. And then I come back to reality and realize I've got 1,900 other bugs to go work on. Yes, Perl 6, right? Python 3000. All right, I think we're done.
IPv6.
Yep. We are out of time.
Hey, buddy, it is the year of IPv6 on the desktop, or at least on the cloud.
Yes.
Antonio, I had you on the people that I will buy them a drink when I see them. You're off that list, man. You're gone.
Good night. Bye.
Right.
I'm supposed to send Ricardo a cowboy hat, by the way. I forgot. I'm going to do that this week.
I'm waiting.
Right, thanks, everyone.
See you, folks.
See you next time.
Bye, folks.
Bye.